Most people think the problem is their life, their jobs, their money, their relationships, their health, their family situation, or their past. And of course, all of those things matter. Real life matters, bills matter, grief matters, pressure matters, difficult people matter, practical responsibilities matter. But none of those things are experienced in a completely neutral way. You experience them through your emotional state, your nervous system, your memories, your beliefs, your identity, your attention and your level of awareness. And that is why two people can go through the same event and leave with completely different experiences. One person can feel inspired while another feels criticized. One person can feel seen while another feels overlooked. One person sees an opportunity while another sees a threat. The event may be the same, but the consciousness meeting it is very different. So what is consciousness? In plain language, consciousness is your capacity to experience. It's the field in which your thoughts, your emotions, sensations, memories, desires, fears, intuitions, and insights all appear. So when you say, I'm aware of this thought, or I can feel something is wrong, consciousness is the space in which that knowing happens. Now, people have debated consciousness for thousands of years. Philosophers, scientists, meditators, mystics, and psychologists all approach it in different ways. Some see it as something produced by the brain, and others see it as something more fundamental than the brain. For this video, we don't need to solve the entire debate. The more useful question is this: how does consciousness shape the way you experience your life? Because this is where the subject stops being abstract. You don't experience reality as a raw fact. You experience it through lots of different filters. If someone doesn't reply to your message, one person might think they're busy. Another might think, I've upset them. Someone else might think, people always ignore me. Same event, completely different meaning. And that meaning comes from the consciousness interpreting the event. Your mind doesn't simply record life, it filters life. It gives events meaning based on your emotional state, your history, your expectations, your identity, and what your attention has been trained to look for. If your consciousness is organized around fear, you'll seek threat more quickly than support. If it's organized around scarcity, you'll notice lack more than possibility. If it's organized around rejection, ambiguity starts to feel really personal. And if consciousness becomes steadier, clearer, and more open, the same life can begin to feel very different. The problems don't magically disappear. Real life still has to be dealt with, but you're less likely to collapse into your first reactive interpretation. And that matters because your first reaction is not always reality. A feeling of rejection does not always mean you were rejected. A feeling of unsafety does not always mean you're unsafe. A feeling of failure does not mean you are a failure. Consciousness becomes useful when you can pause and ask, what is actually happening here? That gap between what happens and what you make it mean is one of the most important places to work. And this is where awareness comes in. Awareness notices what is happening. Mindset is what you think. Identity is who you believe yourself to be. Consciousness is the whole field through which all of that is experienced. And that distinction matters quite a lot because many people try to change their lives only at the level of mindset. They repeat better thoughts, set goals, use affirmations, and try to push themselves into different behavior. And that can help, certainly for a while. But if a deeper part of the person still identifies as unsafe, unsupported, unworthy, unlucky, or destined to struggle, those new thoughts have to fight against a much deeper structure. And this is why surface mindset work often just fails. Behavior becomes difficult to sustain when the consciousness underneath it hasn't changed. And I saw this clearly years ago through a Reiki student of mine called Ian. Ian was giving Reiki treatments to a woman with multiple sclerosis. She was a senior nurse in a hospital locally, so she understood the medical view of MS very well. She knew it was considered incurable, but she agreed to receive the Reiki treatments from him. And over time, her symptoms began to ease very considerably. Then, just as it looked as though she might be moving towards a significant breakthrough, she just stopped the treatments. Her symptoms returned. She started again. They eased again. Then she stopped again. And this happened 3 or 4 different times. And Ian, my student, found it very frustrating because from his point of view, the Reiki was clearly helping. But I asked him to look at it differently. This woman's whole life had become organized around multiple sclerosis. Her identity, relationships, expectations, limitations, and sense of self had all been shaped by that condition. So the question was not simply, can the symptoms improve? The deeper question was, if this condition begins to lift, who does she become? And that question can frighten people more than they realize. Sometimes suffering becomes familiar. Painful, yes, but known. Healing may ask the person to enter a reality that they don't yet know how to inhabit. That is consciousness and identity at work. This is also why intuition belongs in any serious conversation about consciousness. Intuition is a form of knowing that doesn't arrive through linear reasoning. It may come as a bodily sense, an inner pull, a sudden recognition, or a clear signal that something is right or wrong. The difficulty is that intuition doesn't always explain itself. Some years ago, I was at a UK airport with my Lithuanian girlfriend at the time. We were due to fly back to Lithuania together after she'd been to the UK for a short holiday. And as we stood in the departure area, I was suddenly hit by a heavy, persistent feeling that I should not get on that plane. It wasn't ordinary anxiety. Something inside me felt deep, urgent, and really clear. And my rational mind immediately went to work. Was the plane going to crash? I began checking the energy of the other passengers, trying to sense whether they were about to experience some catastrophic event. But everybody felt fine. So I reasoned my way out of that feeling. The flight couldn't crash just for me. We boarded, the flight was smooth, we landed safely in Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania, and at first it looked as though my rational mind had been right. The next morning, I woke up to find the front door of my apartment open. My passport had gone, my wallet had gone, my credit cards, laptop, phone, and everything valuable had been stolen while I slept. Only then did I understand. My intuition had been accurate. It just wasn't about the plane. It was about what waited after the flight. And that taught me something really important. Intuition can be real, but the meaning of the signal may not be that obvious. Deeper consciousness can perceive more than the rational mind can prove, but we still need humility in how we interpret that. So, can consciousness be changed? Yes. It changes all the time. It changes when you're tired, frightened, in love, grieving, meditating, inspired, relaxed, or deeply present. The deeper question is whether consciousness can be deliberately developed. And yes, it can. Meditation trains you to observe thoughts rather than to be dragged around by them. The practice of Reiki can help you access deeper layers of energy, emotion, and embodied experience. And body awareness shows you how the nervous system carries old patterns. Self-inquiry helps you question beliefs and identities you've mistaken for truth. And over time, these old patterns become easier to see. Reactions become less automatic. Intuition becomes easier to hear. The nervous system begins to recognize new possibilities. This doesn't mean consciousness creates every event in your life. That idea can become harmful very quickly, especially when people are dealing with illness, trauma, grief, or real external difficulty. A more accurate statement is this: consciousness shapes your experience of reality. It shapes what you notice, what you avoid, what you repeat, what you reject, and what you're able to receive. That is why this work matters. Because if your deeper consciousness stays organized around fear, lack, shame, or self-protection, the old reality keeps rebuilding itself from the inside. But when consciousness becomes steadier, clearer, and more aligned, you begin to meet life differently. You still need action. You still need responsibility. You still need honesty and discipline. But action begins to come from a clearer place. Start simply. For the next few days, try noticing where your attention naturally goes when nothing demands it. Notice the story your mind creates when a message is delayed or a plan changes. Notice where your body braces before anything has actually happened. Notice what possibilities you dismiss before you've even explored them properly. That kind of observation is not small. It's consciousness beginning to know itself. And when that begins, the way you experience reality is no longer fixed. And that is where real change becomes completely possible.